You can tear up a piece of paper, judge, but you can't tear up the truth. Vanessa Whitcomb said that with my deed pinched between two manicured fingers, her phone camera pointed straight at my face, and half the neighborhood watching from the sidewalk behind her. Then came the sound I still remember better than her voice. Rip. Slow. Deliberate. Fibers separating in the dry October air as she tore the certified copy of my father's deed clean down the middle. The two halves fluttered onto my front porch beside her polished leather shoes. I looked down at them, then back at Vanessa. Her perfume carried across the 6 feet between us, sharp and expensive, mixing with the smell of damp maple leaves and fresh coffee drifting from the mug I'd left inside. There, she said, smiling toward her camera. Maybe now you'll understand. This property belongs to Briarwood Ridge. Behind her, HOA Treasurer Leonard Voss shifted his weight and stared at the driveway. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That interested me. Vanessa's little audience did too. 2 board members stood beside her holding cream-colored folders. A security guard waited near a white SUV parked at my curb. Across the street, curtains moved behind windows. Everyone was watching the show Vanessa had arranged, and Vanessa loved an audience. She turned the phone toward herself. For everyone following this situation, the board has legally taken possession after repeated non-payment of assessments. I almost smiled. Repeated non-payment. That was an interesting phrase considering every HOA payment attached to this address had cleared automatically for 4 years. I crouched and picked up one half of the deed. My father's name, Walter Caldwell, remained visible above the county recording stamp. Vanessa had torn straight through his signature. That document has my father's name on it, I said. Her smile tightened. Had. She lifted the other half with the toe of her shoe. You don't own anything here anymore. The camera kept recording. That was the part she didn't understand. She thought the phone protected her. She thought recording herself standing on my porch made her look official. She had no idea she'd just preserved her own words, her own claim, and her own face beside a document that contained a detail I had noticed 30 seconds earlier. A tiny notary seal near the bottom. Wrong expiration date. Wrong by months. I folded my half of the deed once and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Vanessa expected shouting. Maybe a threat. Instead, I asked, You personally authorized this? She looked directly into the camera. Absolutely. Leonard finally looked up. His face had gone pale. I nodded once. 14 years around federal fraud cases had taught me something simple. When someone is determined to document their own mistake, don't interrupt them. Vanessa thought she'd just taken my house. What she had actually done was give me the first clean piece of evidence I needed. The front door clicked shut behind me, and Vanessa's voice faded beneath the thick oak my father had installed himself in 1998. For a few seconds, I stood in the entryway holding that torn piece of paper while the old house settled around me. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Somewhere inside the wall, the heating duct gave its familiar metallic tick. Outside, Vanessa was still talking to her camera. I could hear the rhythm of her voice through the glass, confident and polished, as if saying something loudly enough could make it legal. I walked past the kitchen and into the garage. The smell changed immediately. Cedar dust, machine oil, cold concrete. 27 years disappeared in one breath. My father, Walter Caldwell, had been a carpenter for most of his adult life, the kind of man who could run his palm across a board and tell you where the grain would split. He bought this place when I was 12. Back then, Briarwood Ridge was barely a neighborhood. There were empty lots between houses, drainage ditches instead of decorative stone culverts, and enough open land behind us that I could hear coyotes after midnight. Dad spent his weekends turning the garage into his workshop. I still had his scarred maple workbench against the north wall. There were pencil marks along one edge where he measured cabinet doors, and a dark coffee ring near the vise that no amount of sanding had ever removed. After he died, I could have sold the place. People assumed I would. Instead, I kept it exactly because it was ordinary. My work involved courtrooms, sealed filings, financial records, and people who could turn a signature into a weapon. Here, I was simply Nate Caldwell, the quiet homeowner who left before sunrise some mornings and occasionally disappeared for days at a time. Vanessa apparently decided that meant I was absent enough to push around. I set the torn copy on Dad's workbench and ran my thumb over the county stamp. A memory came back, so clearly I could hear his voice beside me. I was 17 when he first showed me the property records. He had opened a gray fireproof box and tapped the folder inside. Copies are for arguments, he told me. Originals are for court. Dad had been obsessive about paperwork. Deeds, tax receipts, surveys, insurance records, every document labeled and dated. Years later, when I moved the most important originals into a safe deposit box, I kept his system. Vanessa had not destroyed my deed. She had destroyed a certified copy I kept at the house. More importantly, she had done it while recording herself. I pulled out my phone and checked the county property portal. My name appeared exactly where it should. Owner of record, Nathaniel Caldwell. No completed transfer. No lawful foreclosure reflected there. Yet Vanessa had arrived with security, paperwork, and enough confidence to announce that Briarwood Ridge owned my home. That required more than arrogance. It required documents. I looked through the garage window. Vanessa was beside her white SUV now, still filming. Leonard Voss stood several feet away, rubbing his hands together despite the mild afternoon. Then Vanessa opened her cream-colored portfolio and handed him something. Leonard read it, glanced toward my house, and immediately gave it back. His reaction lasted maybe 2 seconds. It was enough. I looked down at the torn deed on my father's workbench. The paper was damaged. The ownership was not. And somewhere between those two facts, Vanessa Whitcomb had made a mistake she did not yet understand. Vanessa came back the next morning at 8:17, and I knew the exact time because the brass pendulum clock in my hallway had just finished chiming when 3 sharp knocks landed on the front door. Through the window, I saw her white sport utility vehicle angled against the curb like she planned to stay. She wore a cream blazer, dark slacks, and sunglasses despite the gray sky. The leather portfolio was tucked beneath her arm. Her phone was already in her hand. I opened the door but stayed behind the threshold. "Good morning, Nathaniel." She used my full name this time. "We need to discuss your transition out of the property." Transition. That was Vanessa's gift. She could wrap a thread in language that sounded like it belonged in a corporate training seminar. "You mean my house?" I asked. Her smile barely moved. "Former house." She opened the portfolio. The smell of fresh printer toner reached me before she pulled out the documents. Briarwood Ridge completed its acquisition after $8,740 in unpaid assessments, administrative penalties, collection expenses, and legal costs. She handed me a packet nearly half an inch thick. I did not argue. I read. Vanessa mistook silence for surrender almost immediately. "You attorneys always think paperwork is complicated," she said. "It really is not." I looked up. "You know I am an attorney?" "Everyone knows that." Her tone made it sound unimpressive. "Some downtown legal job, correct?" "Something like that." She smiled again. "Perfect." I returned to the first page. The assessment history claimed I had missed payments beginning 11 months earlier. That was impossible. My bank records showed automatic withdrawals every quarter. Page 4 contained a notice supposedly mailed to me in February. Page 7 showed another in April. Page 11 contained the document Vanessa clearly considered her masterpiece, a notarized certification authorizing the association to proceed against the property. I felt the paper between my fingers. Heavy stock. Embossed seal. Designed to feel official. Designed to discourage questions. But official documents have fingerprints that ink cannot hide. Dates. Filing numbers. Mailing records. Signatures. Vanessa had given me all of them. I stopped at the notary block. The commission expiration date was printed beneath the seal. I had noticed it yesterday. Seeing the full packet made it worse. The certification was dated nearly 5 months after that commission had expired. Who prepared this? I asked. Vanessa tilted her head. Our management office. Who approved the lien? The board. And the transfer. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but her chin lifted. I authorized the process personally. I let 2 seconds of silence pass. Her phone was still pointed toward us. You personally authorized it? Yes, Nathaniel. I did. Somewhere behind her, a lawn sprinkler clicked across a yard in steady bursts. Tick, tick, tick. I looked down at the packet again. There it was on page 13, a certified mail tracking number. I recognized the format immediately, but 1-digit sequence looked wrong. I stepped inside, opened my laptop on the kitchen counter, and checked it. No matching mailing record. I checked another. Same problem. Then I pulled up my bank statements. Every quarterly assessment showed paid. Every one. Coffee cooled beside my hand while the pieces began arranging themselves. Fake delinquency. questionable notices, an expired notary commission, a property claim that had not appeared in the county ownership record. This was no longer a loud woman misunderstanding association bylaws. Someone had constructed a paper trail. I created a new folder on my computer and named it Briarwood. Then I saved the first document inside. Vanessa thought she had handed me proof that she owned my house. What she had actually handed me was a map. By noon, the folder on my laptop held 37 files, and the $8,740 had become the least interesting number on the screen. I started with public county records, then compared every date against the packet Vanessa had handed me. The house was still legally recorded in my name. Property taxes were current. No completed foreclosure appeared anywhere in the chain of title. Yet Briarwood Ridge had created enough internal paperwork to make an ordinary homeowner wonder whether reality had somehow changed while he was sleeping. That was the trick. Not sophistication. Volume. Give someone enough official-looking pages, enough seals, enough deadlines, and enough confident voices, and eventually fear starts doing the work for you. I printed the questionable documents and spread them across my father's workbench. The printer clicked behind me. Paper slid onto the tray. Outside, a leaf blower whined somewhere down the block. I arranged everything by date. That was when a name caught my attention. Daniel Price. His property appeared as a reference number inside an attachment listing prior association enforcement actions. I knew Daniel by sight. 72 years old, retired high school chemistry teacher, gray Buick, corner house, 3 doors down. He watered his roses every morning at 7. I walked over just after 1. Daniel opened the door wearing a faded University of Michigan sweatshirt and looked past me before speaking. Did Vanessa send you? No. His shoulders dropped slightly. Then come in. His house smelled like cinnamon tea and old books. I showed him one page from my packet. He did not touch it. He just stared. They did this to you too. 2. One word. And suddenly the room felt smaller. Daniel disappeared into a hallway and returned carrying a blue accordion folder thick enough to strain the elastic band around it. Same cream paper. Same formatting. Same management office. His alleged debt had been $6,200. My wife was in rehabilitation after surgery, he said quietly. I missed one meeting. Vanessa told me they could take the house if I fought the fees. Daniel had paid. Not because he believed the charges were legitimate, but because he was afraid of losing the place where he and his wife had lived for 31 years. Before I left, he gave me 2 more names. 1 became 4. 4 became 7. By late afternoon, I had spoken with a retired nurse, a widower, a young couple with a toddler, and a woman named Marjorie Bell who had sold her house 18 months earlier after receiving what looked remarkably like my own enforcement packet. Different dollar amounts. Same sequence. Assessments appeared. Notices followed. Legal fees multiplied. Then came pressure to pay, sell, or surrender control. Back home, I pinned 7 property records above Dad's workbench. The garage smelled of paper, coffee, and sawdust trapped in wood older than some of Vanessa's board members. I drew no conclusions I could not prove. That mattered. Suspicion was not evidence. Patterns were not verdicts. But patterns told you where to look. At 5:43, my phone buzzed. Vanessa had uploaded another video to the neighborhood page. I watched her standing beside the Briarwood Ridge Monument sign, smiling into the camera as she described my situation as an example of successful property enforcement. Then she said something that made me replay the clip twice. This is not the first time this board has had to take decisive action against an uncooperative owner. I saved the video immediately. Vanessa wanted everyone to believe she had done this before. For the first time all day, we completely agreed. The next morning, I stopped trying to prove Vanessa was wrong and started giving her room to prove exactly how wrong she was. There is a difference. People who build authority out of intimidation usually expect resistance. They prepare for shouting, angry emails, threats, and desperate homeowners waving documents across conference tables. Calm questions make them careless. At 9:12, Vanessa called me. I let it ring twice before answering. Nathaniel, I assume you have reviewed the acquisition packet. Her voice carried that polished patience people use when they believe the conversation is already over. I have. Then we need your acknowledgement signature before Friday. I looked at the 7 property files spread across my kitchen table. Who calculated the $8,740? A pause. Our management office. Who verified it? The board. Who specifically? Another pause, shorter this time. I did. I wrote the time beside her name. And you approved the property action personally? She sighed. We already discussed this. I want to make sure I understand. That sentence worked better than any accusation. Vanessa began explaining. She described the assessments, the collection process, the board vote, and her authority as president. The more she talked, the more precise she became. By the end, she sounded almost proud. Everything was authorized through my office, she said. There is no ambiguity. Thank you. I ended the call. 20 minutes later, an email arrived from Vanessa confirming nearly the same thing in writing. I saved it in Briarwood. At 11:30, Daniel Price knocked on my door carrying his blue accordion folder. He had found something. Buried behind old insurance statements was a payment receipt to Whitcomb Community Management, a company name I had not seen in my packet. Vanessa's last name stopped me cold. She told us it was the association's collection company, Daniel said. I checked the address printed beneath the logo. Suite 214, a commercial building 6 miles away. I searched the state business registry. Whitcomb Community Management had been organized 4 years earlier. Registered agent, Vanessa Whitcomb. I leaned back in my chair and listened to the refrigerator hum. Association penalties were apparently moving through a company controlled by the association president. That alone did not prove fraud, and I refused to jump farther than the evidence allowed. But it justified another question. By mid-afternoon, 3 other homeowners had produced receipts bearing the same company name. Then Leonard Voss appeared. He did not knock on the front door. He came through the side gate and tapped lightly on the garage window. When I opened it, he looked toward the street before stepping inside. I cannot stay. His voice was barely above the sound of the ceiling fan. Then do not. I waited. He swallowed. Vanessa says there is an emergency hearing Friday night. She wants the board to finalize your removal. I heard. She also told us not to discuss the accounting records with you. That was interesting. Why? Leonard stared at the papers covering Dad's workbench. Because you keep asking about things nobody else asked about. I said nothing. Silence did the work. Finally, he reached into his coat and placed a folded notice on the bench. Friday, 7 o'clock. Briarwood Ridge Clubhouse. Emergency enforcement hearing. Vanessa's signature sat at the bottom in blue ink. Leonard headed for the door, then stopped. What kind of attorney are you, Nate? I looked at the notice. The kind who reads everything. After he left, another message arrived from Vanessa. She planned to livestream Friday's hearing for transparency. I read that sentence twice and smiled. She still believed the camera belonged to her. Friday arrived cold and clear, the kind of October evening when every sound carried farther than it should. At 6:48, I walked the quarter-mile to the Briarwood Ridge Clubhouse with nothing in my hands but a thin brown folder. I had spent the previous 2 days doing something Vanessa apparently considered impossible. I had listened. Daniel gave me copies of his receipts. Marjorie Bell forwarded every message she still had from the months before she sold her home. 2 other residents produced assessment letters containing the same strange mailing patterns. I organized everything by date, source, and document type. No speeches, no accusations, just evidence. The clubhouse parking lot was almost full when I arrived. Through the glass doors, I could hear folding chairs scraping across tile and the low murmur of neighbors who normally avoided association meetings. Vanessa had advertised this one as a demonstration of transparent enforcement. She wanted an audience. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. Vanessa sat behind a long table beneath the Briarwood Ridge seal, her cream portfolio positioned beside a small tripod, holding her phone. A red light showed the live stream was already running. Leonard sat 2 chairs away from her. He looked exhausted. Vanessa smiled when she saw me. Right on time. I try to be. I chose a chair in the second row. That bothered her. She expected me at the table, defending myself. Instead, I sat among the homeowners. At 7 exactly, she called the meeting to order and spent 12 minutes describing community standards, fiduciary responsibility, and the consequences of refusing lawful assessments. Then she held up my enforcement packet. Mr. Caldwell has repeatedly challenged the board's authority despite receiving proper notice. I raised my hand. Vanessa blinked. Yes. Who prepared the delinquency calculation? Our management office. Which management office? Her expression changed by half an inch. The association's authorized management provider. Whitcomb Community Management. The room went quiet enough for me to hear the ventilation system click on. Vanessa recovered quickly. Yes. And you own that company? Leonard looked down. Vanessa leaned toward her phone. I founded it. That is public information. Good. I just wanted the record to be clear. She narrowed her eyes. Is there a point? Several. But please continue. That irritated her more than an argument would have. She continued. I asked about the mailing notices. She confirmed they were valid. I asked about the lien authorization. She confirmed she approved it. I asked whether she personally believed the board had authority to take possession of my property. Absolutely, she said. And I would make the same decision again. Her phone captured every word. I glanced at Leonard. A bead of sweat had appeared along his temple despite the cool room. Vanessa reached into her portfolio and removed the 2 torn pieces of the certified deed. She had kept them. She placed them on the table like trophies. This is what happens when homeowners confuse paperwork with ownership. A few people shifted uncomfortably. I almost admired the irony. Vanessa, I said, you may want to stop recording. She laughed. No, Nathaniel. I want everyone to see this. All right. I opened my folder but did not remove anything. Then I have 3 final questions. Did you authorize the assessment against my property? Yes. Did you authorize the documents used to claim possession? Yes. And is that your final answer with the live stream running? Her smile returned. Completely. I closed the folder. Thank you. Vanessa stared at me, waiting for the fight she had prepared for. It never came. Instead, the clubhouse door opened behind us. Conversation stopped. I recognized the measured footsteps before I turned around. Owen Mercer walked into the room wearing a dark suit, followed by a woman carrying a federal document case. Vanessa looked from them to me. For the first time since this began, she stopped smiling. Owen Mercer stopped 3 feet inside the clubhouse, and the room changed without anyone saying a word. Vanessa looked at his dark suit, then at the woman beside him, then back at me as if she were trying to solve an equation with 1 number missing. Her phone kept streaming from the tripod. The tiny red light remained steady. Can I help you? She asked. Owen reached inside his jacket and removed his credentials. Deputy United States Marshal Owen Mercer. The woman beside him opened her document case. Miriam Hale, Office of Inspector General. Vanessa straightened in her chair. This is a private homeowners association meeting. Owen glanced toward me. His expression stayed professional. Good evening, Judge Caldwell. Nobody moved. Even the ventilation system seemed suddenly loud. Vanessa blinked once, then twice. Judge, Leonard whispered. I stood slowly. A chair leg scraped against the tile behind me. United States District Judge Nathaniel Caldwell, Owen said. Vanessa's face lost the polished certainty she had worn all week. Her eyes moved from Owen to me, then to the phone still broadcasting everything. You said you were an attorney. You assumed that was the whole answer. I picked up my brown folder. Before taking the bench, I spent 14 years working federal financial fraud cases, including mortgage fraud, wire fraud, false filings, and schemes built around fraudulent property records. Vanessa reached toward the tripod. Miriam spoke before she touched it. Please leave the recording exactly as it is. Vanessa froze. I could see Leonard breathing through his mouth now, shallow and nervous. Daniel Price sat near the back wall with both hands folded over his cane. He was staring at Vanessa, not me. That mattered. This was never supposed to become a story about my title rescuing me. A federal judge cannot simply turn a personal property dispute into his own courtroom. The moment I recognized evidence suggesting conduct beyond my house, I had contacted the proper authorities, disclosed my personal interest, preserved the records, and removed myself from any official decision involving the matter. I am not hearing this case, I said. I will not rule on this case. I will not use my office to settle my property dispute. Vanessa found enough confidence to speak. Then why are they here? Miriam placed a document on the table. Because the materials provided for independent review raised questions involving financial transactions, property records, and representations made through an entity controlled by an association officer. Vanessa's fingers tightened around the edge of her portfolio. That is ridiculous. Maybe, I said. That is why evidence gets examined instead of shouted about. I pointed toward her phone. You confirmed tonight that you personally authorized the assessment, the property documents, and the claim of possession. You tricked me. I asked questions. Leonard suddenly pushed his chair back. Vanessa, you told us the management company was independent. Her head snapped toward him. Not now, Leonard. He looked at Miriam. I have the accounting ledgers. Silence dropped over the clubhouse. Vanessa's expression changed again, but this time it was not anger. It was calculation. Miriam closed her document case halfway. Mr. Voss, we would like to speak with you. Leonard nodded. Vanessa looked toward the two torn pieces of my deeds still lying on the table. 20 minutes earlier, she had displayed them as proof of her authority. Now they sat beneath the red light of her own camera while a federal investigator documented the room. I looked at that little red light and remembered what I had told myself the first morning. Vanessa believed the camera belonged to her. She was finally beginning to understand that evidence belongs to whoever can prove what it shows. The investigation did not explode overnight. Real cases rarely do. They tighten slowly, one verified fact at a time, until the story someone invented has nowhere left to hide. 3 weeks after the clubhouse meeting, I stood in my garage listening to rain tap against the door while my father's workbench disappeared beneath copies of records residents had voluntarily provided to investigators. I kept my own notes separate. That boundary mattered. Miriam Hale handled the official review, and I remained exactly what I should have been, a homeowner and potential witness. Leonard turned over 4 years of accounting ledgers, payment reports, board minutes, and vendor records. That was when the pattern stopped looking accidental. Whitcomb Community Management had collected administrative charges from homeowners already paying regular association dues. Some charges appeared after residents questioned assessments. Others were attached to accounts belonging to elderly owners or people temporarily away from their properties. Daniel Price's $6,200 was there. So was Marjorie Bell's account. Her file showed escalating penalties followed by a sale under financial pressure. Then Miriam found my $8,740. I remember the sound of her turning the pages across my kitchen table. Paper. Rain. The low hum of the refrigerator. Your account was current, she said. I already knew that. Hearing an independent investigator say it still landed differently. The alleged delinquency had been constructed from administrative penalties, collection fees, and entries that did not match my payment history. Then came the mailing records. Several tracking numbers in the files did not correspond with the notices they supposedly proved had been delivered. The expired notary commission appeared again on documents connected to 2 other properties. Same name, same seal format, same problem. Vanessa had treated paperwork like camouflage. Once someone started checking every leaf, the forest disappeared. The video evidence was worse for her because nobody needed to interpret her tone. Miriam played the clubhouse recording during an evidence review with counsel present. Vanessa's own voice filled the room. I authorized the process personally. Then another clip. We have legal authority to take homes when owners refuse to cooperate. Then the video beside the Briarwood Ridge sign. This is not the first time this board has had to take decisive action. Each sentence sounded different when placed beside the financial records. Leonard's ledger added another layer. Payments to Whitcomb Community Management had increased sharply during the same period enforcement actions increased. Investigators traced transactions, contracts, and approvals. I was not told every detail, and I did not ask. My position made restraint more important, not less. Months passed. Winter stripped the maple tree bare. Briarwood Ridge appointed an interim board after Vanessa stepped aside during the investigation. Independent counsel reviewed disputed assessments. Several homeowners received reimbursements or corrections, while other claims entered formal legal proceedings. Marjorie's situation required separate review because her property had already been sold. Daniel called me the morning his account was corrected. He did not celebrate. He just said, "My wife can stop worrying now." That sentence meant more to me than any headline could have. Vanessa's live stream disappeared from the neighborhood page, but the preserved copy did not disappear from the evidence file. Neither did the receipts. Neither did the ledgers. Neither did the questionable notices. One cold February afternoon, Miriam called and told me the investigation had advanced into formal federal proceedings handled by officials with no connection to my court. I thanked her and hung up. Then I walked into the garage. The 2 torn pieces of the certified deed were still resting inside a clear evidence sleeve on Dad's workbench. Vanessa had spent years teaching Briarwood Ridge that authority came from being the loudest person holding the paperwork. What finally dismantled that illusion was quieter. Dates, receipts, signatures, bank records, and her own recorded words. By early spring, the maple tree outside my kitchen window had started growing leaves again, and Briarwood Ridge felt quieter than I remembered it. Not empty, just quieter. The white sport utility vehicle that used to crawl past my house twice a day was gone. The violation notices stopped appearing in mailboxes. The clubhouse bulletin board, once covered with warnings and penalty schedules, now held meeting minutes, budget summaries, and a handwritten notice asking for volunteers for the neighborhood cleanup. Vanessa was no longer president. Whitcomb Community Management no longer handled association money. The disputed accounts had been transferred to independent review, and the federal matter continued through a court where I had no role, no authority, and no influence beyond the evidence I had provided as a witness. That was exactly how it needed to be. Justice becomes dangerous when anyone believes a title gives them permission to skip the rules, and I had spent too many years around courtrooms to make the same mistake Vanessa had made. Daniel Price came over one Saturday morning carrying 2 cups of coffee. His account had been cleared of the disputed charges, and several $1,000s had been returned after the financial review. He handed me a cup and looked toward my garage. "You keeping those pieces?" he asked. I knew exactly what he meant. For a little while. We walked inside. The familiar smell of cedar and machine oil greeted me as sunlight cut through the dusty garage window. Dad's maple workbench still stood against the north wall, scarred by decades of honest work. I opened the clear evidence sleeve and removed the 2 pieces of the certified deed Vanessa had torn months earlier. The rip still crossed my father's signature. For a moment, I could hear her voice again. "You do not own anything here anymore." I smiled, but not because she had been humiliated or because people finally knew what I did for a living. None of that was the part that mattered. I went inside, retrieved a small key from my desk, and drove 4 miles to the bank. The safe deposit room smelled faintly of metal and carpet cleaner. I unlocked the box and pulled out the gray folder my father had organized years before. Inside was the original deed. Clean, flat, untouched. Walter Caldwell's signature sat exactly where it had always been. County recording information. Legal description. Every line intact. Copies are for arguments. Originals are for court. I could almost hear Dad saying it again. That afternoon, I placed the original on his workbench and set the torn certified copy beside it. 2 pieces of paper telling 2 completely different stories. Vanessa had believed ownership was something she could erase with a dramatic gesture and a camera. She had believed authority came from a title, a portfolio, a board vote, and enough confidence to make frightened people stop asking questions. But a title is not authority when the facts underneath it are false. A camera is not protection when it records the truth. And paperwork does not become legitimate because someone prints it on expensive stock. I slid the original deed back into its folder. Outside, a lawnmower started somewhere down the street. Kids were riding bicycles past Daniel's house. Someone had opened a garage and turned on an old country station. Briarwood Ridge sounded like a neighborhood again instead of an office waiting to issue a citation. Before closing Dad's workbench drawer, I looked once more at the torn copy. Vanessa thought she had destroyed the proof that my home belonged to me. In the end, the paper she tore survived as evidence. The camera she trusted preserved her own words, and the people she expected to remain silent finally started speaking. Dad had been right about documents, but I think he would have understood the larger lesson too. Justice does not need to shout. It does not need a performance. Give it facts, give it patience, and sooner or later, it becomes inevitable.